Hello and welcome to the Teacher's Lounge. Today we're going to be reviewing Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, which was our first Let's Play. Now that you've had a chance to take a look at the game, again, I think I admitted it in the first episode that this was one of my favorite games when I was a little kid. So there is a little bit of a nostalgia factor involved. I'll try to be as objective as possible, but understand that I do have a little bit of bias in favor of this game. So I'll do the best I can to be objective, but feel free to poke at me a little in the comments if I'm just getting a little bit too enthusiastic about Putt Putt. Anyway, just to review some of the basic information, Putt Putt Saves the Zoo was made by Humongous Entertainment in 1995. I believe there's a 97 edition that came out as well. I think that's the one I actually had on CD, but for the life of me, I can't find it. I know it has to be somewhere at my parents' house, but after flipping through bins upon bins of old CDs, I gave up and ate lunch and went home to record. Anyway, the only difference that I can tell in the 95 edition and the 97 edition is, as I said, you can take a picture of Outback Al and with the grocery store guy. I forgot his name. He had a big mustache. Anyway, but I don't think those are really game breakers. So the one that's available on Steam and the Humble Store, which is where I got it. I got this through the Humble Bundle they had for Make-A-Wish, so I didn't have to feel so guilty about buying a game for small children. Went to help people in need make their dreams come true with Putt Putt. And this is the third of the Putt Putt games. By the time we got around to Putt Putt, it was already getting a little tricky to run some of the older ones. For those of you of my generation, you'll remember how finicky well, not that it still isn't, but at least now there are places like GOG which help make it a little easier. And back then in the dark ages, we were small children. We weren't quite able to figure out how to use emulators and things like that yet. But this as a result, like we tried to play a couple of the older ones and they just never worked. So this is the first Putt Putt game that we ended up getting, and it was really the only one we got because we played so many hours of it. My dad figured he didn't need to buy any more if we were going to keep playing the same stupid game over and over again. So anyway, the third Putt Putt game, and by this point I think they'd sort of figured out what the formula was going to be. It's pretty straightforward. They are point and click adventure games, so in the vein of Sam and Max. I've never actually played Grim Fandango. Don't hurt me, internet. But I understand this point and click adventure game too. I played a lot of Sam and Max. Except not quite as terrifying as something like King's Quest, where if you mess up, you die painfully. There is no car death in Putt Putt Saves the Zoo, so it's child friendly. So some of the things that I really like about this game. Well, the first thing that I like, even as an adult, it's charmingly cute. Like, there's nothing in this game that is too offensively terrible. There's no blood and gore, and Putt Putt's language is hot ziggity, let's just say. There's some pretty, it has some animal facts. They're pretty simple, but I did learn about the lion cub spot thing, which I probably knew at some point because I loved animal books, but it had not stayed in my brain. So that was kind of fun to learn something new about lions, or reviewed something fun about lions at the very least. It sort of falls into what I call teacher humor, where it's not really funny, but it's sort of funny. Some of the jokes, they're punny. They're a little painful, but they're kind of fun painful. There's a little bit of that sort of spatial practice where I joked about how, I know my shapes, I know my trapezoids and my squares and my parallelograms. So where you practice with the wrench at one point, and then the sort of spatial, I guess, edging, knowing which one's a curve, which one has 2 points, which one has 3 points when you're getting the Zanzibar, the hippo, off of the iceberg. So being able to recognize what's a curved edge, what's a pointed edge, how many vertices does it have. There's some of that sort of spatial recognition. Other than that, there's not a ton in the straight up educational area. they give you the colors. So you've got your reds, blues, greens, purples, and it tells you what color it is. So if for some reason you had gotten good enough at playing adventure games without knowing your colors, you could learn your colors. And I think more kids these days are spending more time playing on iPads and things. I know you can get Putt Putt on the iPad now. I did find that out. I think I actually have I think I got code from the Humble Bundle for an Android device. Not that I have Android tablet to play off of, but so I guess conceivably you could learn some of your colors that way. Again, I was way too old when I started playing this game. I was probably in the 3rd or the 4th grade, and I'm pretty sure we bought it for my little brother, who was 2 years younger than me, and I just sort of played along because there wasn't much else to do. So it was at least something nice that we could play together. The one thing I like the most about this game is I think it is a great introduction to point-and-click adventure games for kids. And I think having genre introductions is underrated. Just because, when I think back to some of the games that I played as a little kid, they were hard. I mean, some of them were legitimately hard, and I go back and I'm like, wow, I'm impressed that I got as far as I did. Some of them were not as hard, or I've gotten better at the genre since then. Like the shooters, I remember being really hard when I was a kid, but at this point, if you look at my Steam profile, I have almost 400 hours, I think, logged in Left 4 Dead alone. It was my game therapy of choice in college. So I've gotten very, very good at first-person shooters at this point. So going back and playing some of the older ones, they are quite a bit easier. I started replaying Jedi Knight. Not the first one, Outcast. Just a while back, sort of. I got excited when Rebels came out, and I kind of went on a Star Wars kick. But it's much easier, ignoring the fact that I was messing around for half of it, and then I lowered the difficulty because I was playing at 1 a.m. I just wanted to finish. It was not as difficult as I remember it being as a kid. Even on the hardest difficulty, I just was tired and I wanted it done in a day. So it's like, I'm gonna plow through this. Force push. But it's like when we do genre study in literature, we want to start with a more simplistic story before you get to a more complex story. Little kid stories are pretty straightforward, by and large. They usually use a 3-act structure. Not all of them. There's some really great ones that don't. There's some great fourth wall breaking. Mo Willems is We Are in a Book is one of my favorite ones that sort of breaks the fourth wall. And if you don't know anything about Elephant and Piggy, they're easy books to read. They have like 2 words per page, but this one's very meta. Elephant and Piggy realize they're in a book. It's very entertaining. But it sort of introduces you into the fourth wall breaking technique in a simple way that a child can understand. And I think that if you can start with something simpler and build up to something more complicated, you're less likely to lose people along the way. I just finished reading a simplified version of The Secret Garden with one of my 2nd grade students. Probably, honestly, she's a very advanced reader. She probably could have read the original, but it was nice because she didn't really need me to read the simplified version, but it still had some good vocabulary thrown in. They didn't take everything out. It's a good introduction to more complex, more archaic language, and I think that when you are able to, in education we call that scaffolding, where you start with something that you're comfortable with and you make it just a little bit more complicated so that you can kind of reach for the next level and build off of that. The idea is sort of like going up a staircase or a step ladder. You don't want to go from the ground to jumping up to the last rung of the ladder. You're going to fall and you're going to crack your head open. And it's going to be painful and nobody's going to be very happy with the situation. But if you climb up the ladder slowly, then you get to where you want to go without needing to call an ambulance. But I like the idea of having games that can scaffold for kids, particularly point-and-click adventure games, because the logic is not all there. I know one of the selling points for this game, I want to say it was on the back of the box, is like practice logic skills and problem solving, and any of you who has actually played a point-and-click adventure game knows that they can be very contrived and very arbitrary. You know, pick the best one I ever had was I was co-playing a hidden picture game with my mother. One of the things we do. I have a very strange family. We play video games on holidays. So I was playing, I think it was Angelica Weaver, Catch Me If You Can, with my mother on Thanksgiving. And we needed to open a panel. And I was like, gosh, we need a screwdriver. There's no way we're going to be able to open this panel otherwise. So we were looking around. Finally, we look at the inventory. I've got a rope. I've got a shrimp fork. I've got a pair of matches. And I think they were like a pair of socks or something ridiculous like that. And of course, using adventure game logic, we just start clicking on everything in our inventory and trying to make it work. And what do you know? The shrimp fork opened the panel where you really should have been using it. In real life, you would use a screwdriver, but no, in adventure games and hidden picture games, you use a shrimp fork. And whenever we find, so now whenever my mother and I find a contrived situation in a hidden picture game or an adventure game, it's like, oh, it's the shrimp fork. But there's really nothing that's super logical about point-and-click adventure games. Some of it is just learning the techniques and coming up with strategies to avoid being confounded by a product that really, sometimes the logic jumps with them are very, very, very bizarre. I talked about playing Sam & Max, and I love Sam & Max. They're really funny. But every once in a while, I'll come across a puzzle, and I'll be like, yeah, I got no clue what's going on. And I'll look it up, and I would never have thought to do that. Now my boyfriend's much more helpful because he played King's Quest as a child. So he's got all that background knowledge on contrivances in video games that I don't have, and I don't necessarily think quite illogically enough sometimes to solve adventure games. But that's sort of just a roundabout way of me saying that I think that it is really good that we have simpler versions of, in our genres. You know, this is a field where unless you bring in new people who are interested, it dies out. Like MUDs, I don't know anybody who plays MUDs who isn't like in their 30s. Maybe there is a huge MUD community out there and I don't know about it. If there is, please tell me. I think that'd be really cool to read up on. But I don't know. I don't know young, at least when we talk about like the age group that I'm teaching, which are like 7 to 13-year-olds, generally speaking. Like, none of them are playing MUDs. So in order to bring people into that sort of a genre, you need to have a simple way to ease them in. In terms of board games, I like to call Settlers of Catan like the entry drug for board games. Because almost everyone I know started with something like Catan or Carcassonne. I'm trying to think of other ones that are in the starter zone. Dominion's a good one for the deck building games. But once you get good at those simplistic games, you're able to go in and play more complex ones, you know, starting with Settlers of Catan, moving into like Caverna or Terra Mystica, something like that. But if you just jump, especially Terra Mystica, which I just played for the first time, if you just jumped into a game like that, the rule books is insane to flip through. I mean, there's so many different rules for so many different situations. It could be a really big turnoff for someone, if you really need sort of a basic understanding of, you know, how does this game work? It's like when if I watch certain types of movies, like I can predict what's gonna happen in a Marvel action movie pretty well because I have a great deal of familiarity with the superhero genre through reading comics, through watching comic book movies, some good, some bad. I will not name names, but I have expectations of what's gonna happen. Now, you don't necessarily want the same vanilla ice cream all the time. Sometimes you want it with sprinkles, but the basic formula is gonna stay the same. It gets overplayed a lot, but talking about something like the hero's journey and the archetypes of the hero and the mentor character, you know, Do we have a little bit of an over-reliance in that in literature? Yes, probably. And I think some people follow it a little too exactly, especially when we consider some of the misogyny of it. But ignoring all that, like, if you understand the hero's journey, you understand a lot of classical literature and the structure of it. So I know that's really rambly of me. I apologize. This is becoming a much more rambly first review than I intended, but I think it's really important to be able to introduce people successfully into genres in order to be able to keep them there. You know, started off like the X-Wing games is another good example I could think of. You know, I started by just controlling the keyboard for my dad while he did the flying. I think because he didn't want to have to worry about raising shields and he wanted to blame me if we died. But, but you know, you jump from, because if you jump into a flight sim like that, that's really intimidating to be controlling. You got to remember where your keyboard shortcuts are, and there's tons of them in the flight sims. X-Wing probably being one of the easier ones that I played. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. There was one, I think it was like F-22s or something, and the manual looked like a flight manual. I just remember remembering like Microsoft Flight Simulator the first time we bought that. I mean, it looked like a pilot's manual. The thing was absurd. It was impossible. Although we actually didn't crash all the time. Although we killed a lot of passengers in 747s by accident. It was, yeah, that sort of ended my dreams of being a pilot. Anyway, moving on to, that's a lot of the good and some of the interesting things. Moving on to some of the bad. And I kind of touched on this a little bit. It is still a point-and-click adventure game. They're not logical. Anyone who tries to tell you you're going to practice logic skills by playing a point-and-click adventure game doesn't know what they're talking about. You're going to learn persistence skills, and you're going to learn desperately clicking everything skills. At least in Putt Putt, you are rewarded by clicking everything. So almost everything you can click on does something, and I really like that about that game. So that when you click on something, there's something cute, and if you forget and you click on the same thing twice, there's usually one or two different animations. But in the end, it's still a point-and-click adventure game. The puzzles are really simplistic. They are really simple. I think the hardest one is probably the one where you have to match the shape of the bolt for the dam. But really, that's just a matter of, oh, that's a triangle. I need the triangle doodad, which I'm blanking on. Socket? That's a socket wrench, I think. I use the tools. I don't remember what they're called. Don't hurt me. It's really simplistic. Again, when we played it, even as a kid, I knew that this was way too easy. I just sort of enjoyed the silly animals and the silly car, and I still enjoy saying hot diggity. I think it's fun. Again, and going along with that, it would be really nice if there were more variables in the game. I did it before I did Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. I was actually testing all my recording stuff by playing a little bit of one of the Freddy Fish games. And that one actually, it startled me because the first time I tested through, I got the list of things I needed to get, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And then I restarted to test again because I had no audio. Derp. And it was almost a completely different list of things I needed. So I'm assuming that there is some variable about which quest you can get then in that game. I'll have to explore a little bit more when we get to Freddy Fish at some point. Don't worry, that's not the next one. We're not gonna. This is not gonna become the Humongous Entertainment channel, I promise. But it would have been nice if there was more variation, because really, if I think I said even in the first episode, I probably could have speedrunned. I don't know what the past tense should be of that verb. The whole thing in 11 minutes if I'd really done it fast and not bothered wasting time with the rapids and the hockey and the picture taking. It's really fast once you know what you're doing with it. Yeah, I think this one's not so bad for really little kids. I actually really like that it's out on iPad now, because especially if you put the little covers on them, they're at least for me, I haven't had any child disasters with iPads, and I've worked with little kids and iPads. We put the gigantic plastic squishy pads over them and screen protectors, and we give them the little soft tipped pins that look like crayons. And I haven't had any of them break. Whereas I remember we used to have to sit, we were all short, shrimpy little Asian kids. Me and my brother. So we had to sit on pillows upon pillows to reach the computer keyboard because we're too short. I and with the computer, I mean, we sort of knew how to turn it on once we were old enough. But I think if you wanted to do this with really, really, really little kids, which I think would be the best option, that's a lot. I don't know if I would trust necessarily a 4-year-old turning on my desktop. Not my baby. The children are not allowed to touch my baby. So maybe that's just me being overly sentimental about my electronics. But I think this one's much better for littler kids. It's rated E for everyone, which doesn't help me figure out what the appropriate age. I tried to look it up and I couldn't. Maybe it's somewhere. It's probably somewhere out there and I just couldn't find it. But I'm guessing that this game is probably meant for 5 to 7. But I think you could probably play it at 4. I mean, especially, I'm a big proponent of parents sitting with their children while they play video games. My dad did that with us. He watched probably a lot of games that he really could have cared less about. But, I think that's really, it's like when you evaluate movies or books before your kids get them, you should know what your kids are getting into. Yeah, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. Like, I'm pretty okay with kids seeing some controversial things as long as parents are aware of it and they know about it. I did a satire unit one time a couple of years back. We okayed it with Mom. We were like, we're gonna watch The Daily Show. There may be some language issues. There may be some controversial subjects. Is that okay? Yeah, that's fine. Go watch The Daily Show. I figure as long as parents are aware and then you avoid a lot of the pitfalls. Oh, I didn't know that was going to do that. I didn't know that was going to be there. Well, I guess that's kind of me and my personal bias. People are welcome to disagree or agree with me. That's fine. For me, I figure as long as you are involved and you understand what your kids are getting into, you're the parent, you get to make the final call on what they get involved with. Yeah, so that's sort of the bad. It's really simplistic is I think the biggest problem with it. I don't think that it's got a lot of replay. I mean, we replayed it a lot, but at that point I didn't have 150 odd unplayed Steam games. Oops, Humble Bundle causing me trouble. In my Steam library when I was a little kid, we probably got a handful of games a year. We didn't get a lot. We used to go over to our friends' houses and sort of like swap games and like sort of, oh, you got that one? Okay, I'm gonna trade it with you, which is probably why everything's copy protected now because when we were all little kids, we were like, oh, our parents are only gonna get us 2 games a year. We gotta trade them with everyone else and play all the games. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. Would I recommend this game? I would probably recommend it to young kids. This is not going to be fun for your 12-year-old. Your 12-year-old's going to look at you like, what? Unless you have a particularly humorous 12-year-old who's going to get kind of the irony of them playing. But I don't know too many 12-year-olds who are going to get the irony of playing Putt Putt. I certainly got the irony. Oh, one last note was the parents and the parental sort of negligence. That's the only other thing that's kind of questionable. And again, this is another thing that I talked about during the Let's Play itself. But I think that with children's storytelling, there's just a lot of, you got to get the parents out of the way. Because this is supposed to be a kid story. The kid's supposed to be a hero. It doesn't work if the parents / adults in the scene solve all the problems. Again, we just finished reading The Secret Garden with one of my students. There's like no adults doing much of anything. I mean, even the servant girl, Mary, she's probably 16, 17. I mean, that's not really an adult. And she's the one who's providing the main amount of care for oh no, not Mary. Mary's the lead character. Martha, the servant girl's the one doing most of the care for Mary. Mrs. Medlock's kind of running around, overworked, probably underpaid. Poor Mrs. Medlock. But it only works. It's sort of like Chronicles of Narnia too. I mean, I could go on and on in literature about like how they have to like knock the parents out of the way so that it becomes the kid's story. I mean, if you look at Disney movies, parents have really high mortality rate in Disney movies. Sorry, Anna and Elsa. But I think it makes it easier for kids to be able to put themselves in the position of the character that way. Not that I think kids can't understand adult characters, but I think that I think there's a comfort to that. I don't think that kids should exclusively be reading about children. There's some great nonfiction picture books that are about real historical figures I really like. But I think for what it is, it's pretty harmless. And it is a contrived, sort of overused plot device, but it's there for a reason. It's there to sort of feed the kids into the situation and make them the character. So, is there a lot of parental negligence and adult negligence in this game? Yes, but it's for plot reasons, which is not a good excuse, I know. But that is why it's there. As a kid, I didn't notice. I did not notice. I didn't really notice until I started playing it, and I was like, oh, wait, what are the adults doing? I remember as a kid, we were just like, yeah, we're sleeping baby animals, woohoo! So I didn't even, like, think about the fact that, oh, this idiot zookeeper can't even, like, take care of his animals. Or the fact that there's no fences at this zoo, and the animals can just, like, walk around, and they can talk. So I don't know why they're in a zoo when they seem to, like, have perfectly stable societies. But I think I'm reading too much into the world of Putt Putt. Anyway, I think at this point I've gotten a little rambly. But I hope you enjoyed Putt Putt Saves the Zoo. I would love to hear thoughts about Putt Putt as we keep going. I'll keep popping back to check, at least initially. If we start getting lots of comments, then I don't know how much I'm going to be able to go back to old comments. But I'll try at least right now. Our next game, mostly because Halloween month, October, is coming up. I was debating whether we would do like a 1 week throwaway game before, since like technically October starts. Oh no, wait, never mind. Sorry, my brain. I record on Tuesdays, but I post on Thursdays. So yes, by the time I actually post the next episode, it will be October. I'm looking at the calendar. Anyway, rambling again. Sorry. Our next game is going to be Costume Quest 2, which I've never played. I got it on sale from Humble Store. Thank you, Humble Store, for keeping my show in business. I've played the first one. It was not super difficult, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. There was lots of candy and grubbins and fun things. It was highly entertaining. I've heard the second one is not quite as good, but I'm going to reserve judgment. If nothing else, it's very thematic, and I was very excited to pick it up. I'm going to try to finish it before October ends, which means there may be some longer sessions, and I'll try to gauge and try to judge it as best I can. I have no idea how long this game is going to be. I have no idea how lost I'm going to get playing it. The first one was pretty straightforward, so hopefully, yeah, I think it only took me a couple hours, 2-3 hours, to do the first one, plus the winter expansion, or DLC. Anyway, so Costume Quest 2, never played it before, don't spoil it for me. That's the only thing. If I want doing a Let's Play, don't tell me what's gonna happen. Don't ruin it for everybody. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and I'm very excited to jump into that. If we happen to finish it early, I have a backup game that is also slightly Halloween-y themed that we could play. But I think it's gonna probably take us the month if we're only doing one episode a week. Anyway, sayonara, and have a lovely rest of the week.